Hey everyone, welcome back to The Explainer. I am so glad you're here with us today, because we are diving headfirst into some of the most bizarre, absolutely mind-bending secrets ever pulled straight out of the declassified FBI vault. If you love uncovering hidden history as much as I do me a quick favor. Hit that like button, share this with a fellow curious mind, and make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an explainer.
Okay, let's dive into this. Did Adolf Hitler actually survive World War II and, live out his days in a quiet suburban house? And, wait for it, is Bigfoot real? Now I know, these sound like crazy late-night internet rabbit holes, but these are actual, literal questions that the FBI spent your tax dollars investigating. Today we're taking an in-depth exploration through these declassified archives, focusing on high-profile cases like the Hitler survival investigation, celebrity surveillance of massive figures like John Lennon and Ronald Reagan, and of course, unexplained mysteries like Roswell and Bigfoot.
So, here is our roadmap for today's explainer. First, we'll look at high-profile historical hunts. 2. Spying on the stars. 3. Investigating the unexplained. And 4. Accessing your own file.
Section 1. High-profile historical hunts, focusing on the search for Hitler.
Right after World War II, the FBI's global reach and, quite frankly, their paranoia were just at an all-time high. The world stage was super fragile. Now, the widely accepted public belief was that Hitler died in a Berlin bunker as Allied troops advanced. Obviously. But the FBI was actively investigating swirling rumors that he escaped to South America. Or even more bizarrely, it's almost like the plot of a bad sitcom, they investigated claims that he shaved off his infamous mustache and was living completely undercover as just an everyday suburban guy.
So, the crucial point here is the FBI actually had to take these rumors seriously enough to dedicate real time and resources to them. But what did the declassified documents actually reveal after all that wild digging? Well, it was just a blunt final truth. Nope, he is dead. Case closed. But global adversaries weren't the only people on the FBI's radar.
Section 2. Spying on the stars in the era of Hollywood paranoia.
So the FBI eventually shifted its intense gaze from foreign dictators over to domestic celebrities. They became absolutely obsessed with the cultural influence of the entertainment industry. And this brilliantly illustrates the stark contrast in how they dealt with different stars. On one hand, you had major targets. John Lennon, for example, faced a literal deportation threat fueled by the Nixon administration's fears of how he might influence the 1972 election. Charlie Chaplin was outright blocked from returning to the U.S. in 1952 because they suspected he was a communist sympathizer. But then, on the other hand, you have Ronald Reagan, who long before his presidency while he was heading the Screen Actors Guild, willingly acted as an informant, turning over names of suspected communists in 1947. And Walt Disney himself was actually named a full special agent in charge contact, providing info to the government until his death. The historical facts here truly speak for themselves.
And the sheer volume of resources spent on some of these stars is just staggering when you actually look at the page counts. John Denver, the wholesome country singer, he had a 33-page file largely because of his anti-war activism. Comedy legend Lucille Ball amassed a 156-page file thanks to some 1930s political affiliations, though she also eccentrically claims she could hear spy chatter coming through her tooth fillings, which is pretty wild. And then there's author Truman Capote with a whopping 200 pages that might have had a little something to do with him making a very personal enemy out of FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover.
Section 3. Investigating the unexplained. We are entering real-life X-Files territory now.
Transitioning from Hollywood paranoia into the outright bizarre, the FBI mapped out decades of escalating weirdness. We start with the famous Roswell incident in 1947, move to the infamous Hotel UFO memo in 1950, jump into some highly disturbing animal mutilations in the 1970s, and cap it all off with a literal Bigfoot hair analysis in 1976. Let's break these down.
First up, Roswell. It's been the holy grail of UFO lore for over 70 years, right? But when we finally look at the one-page declassified FBI memo, the reality is a lot less cinematic. Instead of a massive alien spacecraft, the FBI actually describes a mysterious flying disc shaped like a hexagon and suspended from a balloon. So it sounded a whole lot more like an odd weather balloon than an actual galactic invasion fleet.
But of course, the UFO conspiracy certainly didn't stop there, and that's thanks in large part to this next document. In March 1950, Special Agent Guy Hoddle sent a truly bizarre memo. He claimed an Air Force investigator recovered 3 flying saucers in New Mexico, complete with 3 extraterrestrial bodies. This one single memo fueled decades of conspiracy theories. But what's the declassified result? Absolutely no evidence of this was ever confirmed by the FBI. Nothing.
Moving into the 1970s, the FBI had to investigate something far more unsettling. Across the western and prairie states, there were widespread reports of completely unsolved animal mutilations, mostly cattle. The files describe these animals with odd sigils carved into them, appearing as if they've been mauled by some sort of machine. The FBI looked into everything, but honestly, to this day, it remains a completely unsolved and deeply disturbing phenomenon.
Now, what's really interesting about this next case is it brings us to arguably the most fascinating American legend the FBI ever took seriously enough to investigate, Bigfoot. You know the story, a legendary, giant, hairy humanoid rumored to be lurking in the American woods. The rumors were so persistent back then that the FBI actually dedicated real resources in the 1970s to comb the woods for evidence of footprints and hairs. And you have to hear this declassified conclusion. Quote, in 1976, they actually did find long hairs that couldn't be matched to any species. The declassified investigation was declared inconclusive, unquote. They literally couldn't match the hair to any known animal. Now, they didn't say it was Bigfoot, but by officially declaring it inconclusive, they certainly left the door cracked wide open for the true believers out there.
Section 4. Accessing your own file. The personal turn. So, let's move on and see how this all builds, because we've talked about historical monsters, Hollywood elites, and literal cryptids. But it is super important to remember that the FBI's massive archives also contain files on everyday people who just happen to pop up on their radar. And if you're feeling a little curious, you can actually find out what they know about you. Here's how. Step 1. Submit a Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA, request. Step 2. You just await the unsealing of any non-classified documents that happen to match your name. And Step 3. Discover exactly what the FBI has in your file. Believe it or not, most targets of FBI investigations never get charged and never even know they were being watched.
Which leaves us with one memorable and maybe slightly unsettling question to end on. What do you think the FBI has in your file? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer of the declassified FBI vault. If you learned something new today, please go ahead and hit that like button, share this explainer with your friends, and subscribe for more deep dives into the weird, wild, structured truth behind the world's most fascinating stories. See you next time.